I'm Leah Small, and this is Virginia Voices, where you will hear first-person stories from people most affected by current politics, policy, and economic trends. We give Virginians outside the news a full stage to explore their thoughts and experiences beyond a few sound bites or paragraphs in a daily news story. Virginia Voices is a project of the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO.
One of the things that's been carried through the years, and you'll see it through the history of the tribe and through this museum, is the annual tribute to the governor, and there are multitudes of pictures here.
Lois Morning Glory Carter is one of 380 members of the Mattaponi tribe. 70 still live on their reservation in King William County, Virginia. The Mattaponi and neighboring Pamunkey reservations are some of the oldest in the United States. Carter guides us through the tribe's one-room heritage museum on the reservation. Every space, from floor to ceiling mounts, was filled with artifacts, many centuries old, newspaper clippings, and family heirlooms, including an ancient wood-carved canoe dug up from a Mattaponi riverbed, and 200-year-old beaded regalia passed down and donated by a Mattaponi family.
And then this is what I'm really proud of, too. This is the back scales of a sturgeon. And my grandpa, he was down here shad fishing, and he caught it by net, and it was like 200 pounds or so.
The Mattaponi Reservation of roughly 250 acres sits high above the Mattaponi River, granting a prized view of a wide river bend with wooded shores. It's quiet, peaceful. The leaves have turned, and many have fallen by mid-November.
It's sacred land. It's spiritual. When you start coming down this Indian Town Road, that was always a feeling. Going to the reservation, coming here to see my grandfather, and coming on Sundays and staying through the holidays, or coming on vacation just in the summertime to hang out. It was always a great feeling knowing that feeling when you turned right there at Wakima and Indian Town Road, you were home. And I feel that a lot. The Mattaponi River is right by the church. We are people of the river, and that's what they called us. And this is River of High Banks, Mattaponi River. So when we talk about Mattaponi River, we think about, I always talk to my grandchildren and say things like, this is our river.
Carter is a member of the Mattaponi Tribal Council, devoted to preserving the culture of the tribe. A cornerstone of her work is leading tribal efforts to apply for federal recognition, which grants more sovereignty in tribal government, more access to social services, and funding for cultural programs. The tribe submitted its petition for federal recognition to the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs on November 7th. The Nottoway, another Virginia tribe, also announced its bid for federal recognition on November 25th. Since the 80s, the Mattaponi aimed to achieve federal recognition, but lack of funding stalled efforts. But a recent grant jump-started the project. The 3-year process required extensive documentation of Mattaponi history, made difficult by the remnants of a racist 1924 state policy that erased the records of the Mattaponi. Carter and Mattaponi Chief Mark T. Falling Star Costello and Tribal Council member Tony Waldrop spoke about what Mattaponi's petition means in the complicated history between the tribe, state, and federal governments.
Over the last 3 years, I've learned so much about our tribe and about the history. And I had an enrollment specialist, an archivist, an administrative assistant, and a collection specialist that worked with me at the office. And there was a lot of places we went to. There was the University of Richmond, University of Virginia, NARA in DC. There was Library of Virginia. There was multiple places, courthouse here, that we went over the last 3 years to collect information for federal recognition. When it comes to federal recognition, and we're going through the OFA, which is Office of Federal Acknowledgement in DC, or Bureau of Indian Affairs. You have to prove who you are. You have to prove who you are and where you came from.
In 1924, Virginia passed the Racial Integrity Act, which classified Virginians as either white or colored. This erased the ethnic identity of indigenous people in Virginia and became known as a paper genocide. The legislation stood until 1967. Due to inaccurate statistical records, Virginia's tribes have faced difficulties documenting lineages to gain federal recognition. In 2018, nearly a century after the Racial Integrity Act was enacted, Congress passed an act legally recognizing 6 Virginia tribes whose existence was legally denied, but the Mattaponi is one of 4 Virginia tribes still without federal recognition.
To be honest with you, that Racial Integrity Act had everything to do with destroying our heritage, destroying us as people, because you had people here in Virginia that went around trying to dispose of our birth certificates at Vital Statistics. You also had the same people come in here changing birth certificates as far as who you are. You know, you were either this or you were that. There was no in between. There were no Native Americans here. That's the way it was. But now we're gaining ground and we're coming back to the way it should have been all along. Going through where we were and where we came from meant a lot to me. And and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I don't see any way why the government should deny us federal recognition. We've got all the proof.
Despite exclusionist policies, the ties between the Mattaponi and Virginia's government are binding. For the last 347 years, days before Thanksgiving, the Mattaponi have presented Virginia's governor with a tribute of game in honor of treaties signed in 1646 and 1677. 2 deer hunted by young men of the tribes are laid at the feet of the governor. The ceremony is a reminder of the promises kept between Virginia's government and the tribe, Chief Costello says.
It keeps our government-to-government relationships with the state of Virginia. We are our own sovereign government, and we are upholding our end of the bargain, as I say, our treaty, and as we expect the state of Virginia to do so. There's many things that grant you your land. You'll have our fishing rights, hunting rights, and it's really the Treaty of Peace is what it's called. Middle Peninsula.
Coming weeks after the Mattaponi's petition, the annual hunt and treaty ceremony is more significant this year, Costello says.
I think it shows, that we're still here. We haven't gone anywhere. It's going to show that the governing body of our tribe is there and it'll be there in force.
Governor Glenn Youngkin wrote a letter to the Bureau of Indian Affairs in support of the Mattaponi's petition, citing the nearly 350-year relationship between both governments. The tribe received formal state recognition in 1983, but it doesn't grant the same rights and opportunities as federal recognition. Federal recognition could bring resources that would address historic wrongs and help alleviate poverty experienced by elder Mattaponi, Costello and Carter say.
We'll have the government-to-government relationship with the United States, not just the state of Virginia, as one big piece. And another is just to help out in ways for our children to get further education, get all the health benefits that we can help some of our elders, and just for us to progress and grow and not rely on grants and things of that nature to get us to where we need to get to. This is a way where we can be self-sufficient. I think we're entitled. Our reservation used to be over 5,000 acres. And after the Civil War, Kewan County basically stepped back and said, hey, they don't need all that land. We're going to give them 100 acres and that's it. Then here recently, we ended up purchasing some land adjacent to the tribe. And what we had to do with that is deed it back to the state and for them to put it in trust for the reservation. So basically, we had to purchase our land, some of our lands back, then deed it over to the state, and then for it to become part of reservation property. I think historically, is housing opportunities. One thing is living on the reservation, you cannot get a conventional loan for a home. So if you had to have money out of pocket or buy a double-wide trailer or something of that nature, you could not, unless you had to build yourself and did a little bit at a time. So opening doors up like that.
The land was taken many years ago, gradually. But, I mean, it's disheartening that you have to buy back land that once belonged to your ancestors. But, it is what it is, and we just need to move past that. And we need to make sure that, we're doing our due diligence and we're getting the history back out there to the people, our cultural information as far as what we are about, to let people know we're still here. We've lived these long years with just living off the land and doing what we needed to do to help one another here on the reservation and off the reservation. But, we've gone through poverty too, as far as you ate what you grew, you fished from the river, you sold fish to make a living for your children and your grandchildren and your family. So it's a lot of benefits to federal recognition to help with those opportunities. And it's more than what I'm even saying. But, our children need education, and the children need to be able to do what their heart desires.
For Tribal Council member Tony Waldrop, federal recognition and continuing to honor ties with Virginia's government preserves and passes down the Mattaponi way of life. From a young age, Waldrop has hunted deer for the Mattaponi's annual tribute.
Well, the federal recognition will help us preserve what we have here, and it'll also help us be able to show other people, how we live, how we do things, and it's completely different. Right now, we don't actually have that funding, but with being federally recognized, maybe we will.
The Mattaponi way of life means living in harmony with the woods and river and taking enough resources from the landscape to subsist while giving back. For Waldrop and those before him, that means fishing for herring and rockfish through the spring to salt to last through winter, but also respawning the river to boost fish populations. They catch turtles and hunt game.
Having both sides of the world, we have the water and we have the woods. I've already tried to distill that in my boys and my daughters. Being federally recognized will help with that and guarantee that in a broader perspective. And maybe it'll teach someone like yourself, how we live, and you might take something from it.
For Carter, federal recognition means giving the Mattaponi the funding to tell their story accurately and advocate for Native rights.
Make sure that our children and our grandchildren and whomever beyond us understand our history and understand where we came from and what we're trying to accomplish here, and that is to be self-sufficient, to make sure that we can strive and keep telling our history in schools and so forth. I know in schools you have, one side in books and things like that, and that's what kids are taught. But they need to hear, people need to hear both sides to what really went on. And this way we can tell our story. My father was Chief Jacob Thundercloud Costello. My grandfather was Chief O.T. Haskanawanaha Costello, and my great-grandfather, George F. Costello, and his name was also, Native American name was Thundercloud. And they strived to keep the reservation going. They fought the government, they fought the state, they fought King William County for different things that went on over these years.
So you have to carry the fight.
I'm carrying the fight, yes. We are carrying the fight.
I'm host and producer Leah Small. Virginia Voices is a project of the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO. Executive producers are Christopher Tyree and Lewis Hansen. The podcast is edited by Chris and myself. Virginia Voices is made possible through a grant by Virginia Humanities and donors like you. You can read the story and see photos from today's show and past episodes on our website, vcij.org, which is linked in our bio. We hope that if you like these conversations, you'll subscribe to Virginia Voices, where we'll continue to share the stories of Virginia citizens whose lives are impacted by the news of the day. On behalf of everyone here at the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism, thank you for your time and support.